Dr. Heilige Mishnah, Elu Treifus, Bebehema. These are the treifus that would apply to a behema. And if you remember, we had one shot in the Gemara earlier that Elu Treifus means anything that's non-kosher, and it even includes nevelas. Because if you remember, one of the items in the Mishnah was considered a nevela. Elu Treifus Bebehema, Nekuba Saveshet. If there is a hole in the veshet, if we count the amount of holes that aser, I think it'll be 8. So let's see, the kubas of veshet, that's 1. A psukas gargeris, the gargeris has to be cut with roiv, as we know. So that's not a hole. Nikav krum shalmoyach. So that's the second nikev. Then there's nikev halev leveis chaloloi.
What's the krum shalmoyach?
The krum shalmoyach is the membrane around the brain. Then you have nikav halev leveis chaloloi. What does it mean leveis chaloloi? The heart has chambers, but the heart is muscle, so it's not like a membrane. It's a thick piece of meat, a thick piece of muscle. In order for it to be a treifa due to a hole in the heart, the hole has to get all the way into the chambers where the blood is. So leveis chaloloi v'mloigil lachalal katani sefer the ksheira, the Mishnah will tell us it's kosher. So this is so far the third instance of a hole answering. Nishbur hashedra v'nifsak hachut shalom. If the vertebrae broke and the chut hasedra got cut. Rashi tells us that the main thing is that the chut hasedra gets damaged. That makes the treifa, not the broken vertebrae. But usually the way a chut hasedra gets damaged is because there was a broken vertebrae. Nite la kovet, if the liver was completely removed, and nothing was left of it, because we all know that a person can survive with even up to 10% of their liver remaining, and the liver regenerates. The liver is an organ that regenerates. Hareya shenikfa. So now we have the fourth instance of a hole. If the lung had a hole in it, oy shechasra, or it was missing. And the Gemara is going to ask, by definition, if it has a hole, it was missing. Rab Shimon Omer, the hole is not enough just to be in the outer area of the lung. The hole has to penetrate up until where there's veins and arteries going through the lungs. That's where the oxygen gets absorbed into our bloodstream. So the hole has to get all the way down to the veins. Rashi says, the small little pipes, that the blood flows through when you cut it. Nikva hakeva, that's hole number 5. Keva is one of the stomachs. If that is punctured with a hole, Rashi says b'mashahu, it will make it into a treifa. Nikva hamora, which is I think the gallbladder. I think that's number 6. Nikva adakin, if the intestines have a hole in it, that's number 7. Hakeres apnimis shenikva, that's number 8. The inner keres that got a hole in it, oy shenikra roiv achitzoina, or roiv of the outer keres. We'll see what that means. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, hagadola tefach. If it's a big animal, if it tears even as much as a tefach, even though it's not roiv, it will make the animal into a treifa. Laktana, but if it's a small animal, if even less than the tefach was torn, but it's roiv, then it will aser al treifa. Let's see what this means. Roiv achitoino b'gemara mefarish. So we'll see what precisely this is referring to. Hameses ubeisa koisos.
Sorry to interrupt. They check all these things out after every shechita?
No, we go basa roiv. I think we only check certain treifas that are more common, like the lungs. Right? That's what we had a Rashi when we were learning about roiv. Rashi told us that most of these treifas we don't check. We're starting on the roiv, and where there's a huge roiv, and where there's not such a huge roiv, nikva reya, that's what we check for. And then Rashi says, but don't tell anybody. If you lose the reya, you'll be okay, but don't tell anybody. So Zok Gemara weiter. What about the messes and the basic koisos? Shenikfu lechutz. The messes and the basic koisos, they're connected to each other because the food, the partially digested food, does pass from one to another. So if there was a hole in the membrane that's in between the two stomachs, that means the hole doesn't reach the outside. It's just in between the two stomachs. That would not passel out typhus, but it was nikvul chutz. If there's a hole in them that goes to the outside, the inner cavity of the animal, that would be a problem. Now it says, how is it possible that there's a hole in between them? There's a natural passageway in between them. So it must be that there's also areas where they're connected, besides the place that's supposed to be open. And if that area gets punctured, then it would not be a treifa.
I just want to mention, so you mentioned we go after Roiv. So that would make all of these issues moot because we never.
No, you don't check, but if you notice, then you have a problem.
When can you possibly notice?
Well, they're taking the stomach and intestines out of the animal, and they notice a nail coming through. There was a nail there that popping out of the stomach.
Okay.
So that's usually how a puncture would happen, because the animal ate something that caused the hole. So they don't actually spread it out and check for small punctures, but if they notice it, then there will be a problem.
But they don't have to go looking for it?
That's right. It's only the lungs that they actually look for trouble.
Okay.
Okay, what if the animal fell off a roof? I think there was once, you can ask me how did they get on the roof, but the answer is simple. Everyone knows there used to be a restaurant in the basement of the Plaza Hotel, and it was called Cow on the Roof. Remember that? So it fell off the roof. Or the ribs of the animal got damaged, or udrusas has a eighth. If an animal was attacked by a wolf and its claws penetrated the skin of the animal, Rashi says that there's a Ave puts poison into the animals. Now, scientifically, nowadays at least, we don't know of such a thing, but in this beautiful sefer that Shlomi is sharing with us, they discussed Rusas Hazav, and they theorize that it's probably referring to the bacteria that constantly grows under the nails of predatory animals, because they don't clean and trim their nails every Erev Shabbos like we do, and therefore stuff builds up, and that could be very, very potent. It could kill people. And as a matter of fact, in Vietnam, the types of booby traps that the Viet guys would set for the American soldiers, one of the simple ones that they used to do is they always used human feces as the source of the poison. They would sharpen sticks, and they would put on the top, on the sharp end, all feces, which built to be a nice bacteria. Then they would dig a pit, and they would put a whole bunch of these in the pit pointing up, and then they would cover over the pit that it looked like the grass, it looked like the floor of the jungle, and when an American soldier would walk on it, he would fall in, and he would get pierced with a very bacteria-laden stick, and it would create tremendous sickness, and they would die. They used to do mamish bachsori. Sometimes they would put them coming out of the sides of the pit, pointing down. So when the soldier fell in, he couldn't pull his foot out, because as he pulled his foot out, it would get stuck. It was terrible what they did, and it would make that they wouldn't die instantly, but they would get so sick, and within a week they would die. They would be out of service. So that's similar to Drusas Hazaev, literally. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Drusas Hazaev, Bedaka. Only a B'dahei Medaka would die due to the poison in the Drusas Hazaev, like a sheep or a goat. But for a cow to die, that would require Drusas Ari. It would require being attacked by a lion. Drusas Ari V'gasa. Drusas Hanates, the claws, nates is, I believe, an eagle, ba'oif hadak, in a small bird, or drusas hagas, ba'oif hagas. I don't know what the targum word is, but I think it's ostrich. If you look at Rashi on oif hagas, Rashi says nates is ashperar. Is that an osprey? It's a very big bird, and there's oif hagas is oif hagas. Oh, he doesn't say gas is ostar. Is that an ostrich? Is there an English translation of it? A goose or chicken is the oif hadak. But what's the drushes hagas? No, yeah, he doesn't say what it is. A large hawk. Okay. And ashperver, I love the cop out when they don't know the answer. And what's the nets? There's a huge bird. I think it's the largest bird around. They fly over the Grand Canyon. I think it's called an osprey or something. It has like a 12-foot wingspan. Okay, Zok Gemara weiter. Zaklal, the general rule of treifis is kol she'ein kamoya chaya. If a similar animal with a similar wound would not survive, treifa, that would be a treifa, and the Mishnah is just giving details of examples. So I just want to go through how these four stomachs work. So there's actually a flow, there's actually a method to how the cow digests. So I'm just going to share it with the oilam, because Shani gave us a gewaltige book. So first, it discusses the path of food. So this is the throat. So the animal eats food, and it goes into the caris. That's known in English as the rumen, and there it begins to digest, but it doesn't digest enough to continue the process. And after it goes into the caris, it's sent into the basic choices. The basic choices is an area of the stomach that decides, is this ready to be sent to the next step of digestion, or could it use another chew? And if it can use another chew, then it's sent back up to the animal's mouth, and that's when the animal chews its cud. That's called chewing its cud. Then it comes in for a second round. In the caris, it gets processed. Then it goes into this basic choices, and if it passes the test, it doesn't go up again. It goes into what's called the hemsis, or the amasam, where it starts to break down more, and then after that, it goes into the keva, which is the final step of digestion before it goes into the intestines. So that's how the four stomachs work. And then they have a little bit of a cutout. The basic choices is here because it looks like a series of small chambers, and the hemsis is more like a series of folds with little hair-like structures in it that help break down the food. I like it seeing it from the outside better. Okay. And he goes through in detail, the process of exactly what happens in each stomach. It's dehydrated, it gets rotted, But whatever the case is, it goes through these four steps. Okay. So Zok Tehelig Gemara. Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish. Remez L'Treifa Mina Torah Minayin. Is there a remez somewhere where the Torah discusses the fact that there's something called a treifa? Frank the Gemara Minayin. You don't need a remez. It's often in the Torah. It says Ubasar, Basada, Treifa, Lo Yisei Chel. So it's a very very explicit prohibition of treifa. Ella, what we're looking for is remez L'Treifa She'ena Chaya Mina Torah Minayin. Is there a remez somewhere in the Torah that we know from that one of the conditions of an animal being a treifa is that it cannot survive? The Katani we learned, the Katani Seifa, because the Seifa of our Mishnah says, Zaklal kol shein kamoya chaya treifa. So from there we can figure out Miklal the treifa in a chaya. So from our Mishnah you see that our Mishnah holds that a treifa cannot survive. Where do you see in the Torah a remez to the fact that it only crosses the threshold into being a treifa if it's an animal that will not survive long term? Minale, the Chsiv says in the pasuk, "V'zois hachaya asher toichelu." So let's have a look quickly at the pasuk inside. It says, "Dabru el bnei Yisrael lemar zois hachaya asher toichelu mikala behema asher la'aretz. So it's not really talking about treifa. It's just speaking about these are the animals that you're allowed to eat. I believe from this pasuk, the Gemara somewhere brings a raya that the word chaya is an all-inclusive term that includes behema as well, which is obvious from this pasuk. These are the chayas that you're allowed to eat. Mikala behema asher la'aretz. So it just means these are the animals you're allowed to eat. But we darshan chaya echoil. If it's going to live, then you're allowed to eat it. But she'ena chaya, if it's not going to survive, loy seichel. So from there we know mechwal the treifa loy chaya. Simple enough. Zok the Gemara, but we know it's a machloikas tanoim. Ulaman the amar treifa enecha ulaman amar treifa chaya. According to the Manam holds that the psul of treifa is a psul of treifa even if the animal could live with that blemish. Minale, how do you know that rule that it could even live? Nafgale mizois hachaya asher toichelu. Only this chaya, but there's others. Zois hachaya asher toichelu. Zois hachaya echoil chaya acheres loy teichel. You're only allowed to eat some of those that are living. Others that are going to live, you're not allowed to. So there must be some chayas that are going to live that you're still not allowed to eat. Mechlal the treifa chaya. The idich hay zois my ovidlay. If you hold that treifa is ein chaya, what's the zois chaya? It's mashma. You're only allowed to eat a subset of those animals that will survive. My ovidlay. He learns from it what Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel suggests to learn from it. The Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, Zois HaChaya Shurtechelu, Melamed, this teaches us, Shetafas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mikol Min Umin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he was teaching Moshe Rabbeinu which animals are kosher and which aren't, he actually took an example of each animal, the Hera Loy Moshe, and he showed it to Moshe. So it's not a discussion of charfas; it's a discussion of identifying to Moshe those animals that were allowed to be eaten. So Tosfos asks right away. There's a list of items that Moshe Rabbeinu was struggling to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to show him models of. As Tosfos says, Moshe, which was menorah, Rish Chodesh, and Shrotzim. How come it doesn't list which animals were kosher? Nami, Hadam b'medrash kemin matbeya eish hera kadosh baruch hu l'Moshe doesn't list that either. Ichsev zeh yitnu shema lechoshev elamidi diniskasha, things that were very difficult for Moshe to understand, and that prompted Hashem showing an example of how Hani Avavi Sherheyu loy niskasha ben. Yes, he was shown an example, but Moshe wasn't struggling to understand it. El shetama al adavar ma yuchal adam litin kofer nafshoy. He was thinking how could someone give kofer. So therefore, her heyu hakadosh baruch hu lahavchin heitiv uloidia liyisrael. That's referring to the machzah shekel, I guess. V'chein hachal laharis liyisrael ezu yasur ve'ezu muteris, but not that it was difficult for Moshe to have understood. Okay, so Zok Gemara, the idich nami. Everybody needs it for that. So then, how could you now learn Zois Achaya Asher Techelu? But there are some chayas you shouldn't eat. You don't have an extra Zois anymore. Zok Gemara ein nechanami. We don't. Ela Treifa Chaya Minale. We'll have to find another makar for Treifa Chaya. Nafkalemi idich Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. They could learn it from a different limud that Devei Rabbi Shmuel taught us. The Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, Bein Achaya Hanacheles Uvein Achaya Asher Lo Yisrael. We learn the Torah says, I believe it's at the end of Shemini, it says Lahavdil Bein Hatame Uvein Atar Uvein Achaya Hanacheles Uvein Achaya Asher Lo Yisrael. Elu Shmoina Esrei Treifas. These are the 18 Treifas Shenemru LeMoshe Misinai. But we know it from Achaya Shaloi Sayachel, so you see it's a Chaya, you're not allowed to eat it, and it's referring to Treifas, so you see that a Treifa could be Chaya. Now this is a very famous pasuk, it's a famous Gemara on this pasuk. It says, so the Gemara says that the Gemara says if a Yoledis it has a very big urge and desire to eat, it's pikuach nefesh if you don't give her to eat. So what happens if a lady who's a yeledes is very hungry, she needs to eat, and it's Yom Kippur? So what do? You're not supposed to eat on Yom Kippur. So you whisper to her, it's Yom Kippur, and if she's able to subdue that that craving to eat, then fine. But if not, you have to feed her anyway because it's pikuach nefesh. And the Gemara says that there was a woman that once was able to overcome her desire, and it turns out that the baby was Rabbi Yochanan, I think. I think it's Rabbi Yochanan. There was another Yerledis that couldn't overcome her craving, and her son was a bad guy. I think what he did was he cornered the market of a certain payre, and he caused inflation, and he caused the prices to go up, and he hurt Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara says, the Vilna Gaon says that's shot of achaya and achelos, the difference between achaya, a woman giving birth who eats when she has a craving, uvein achaya ashaloi seochel, and the difference between a woman giving birth who's able to overcome her cravings. One gives birth to a Rabbi Yochanan, and one not so much. One gives birth to a Rabbi Yochanan, and one gives birth to a Gvir. The guy knows how to make money. Okay, so let's go more weiter. Elu shmoina esrei. So there are those people who would take out of here. Avada she should eat. Did you love a son of Gvir? So let's go more, and no one's going to say bad about him that he cornered the market because once he's a Gvir, he's up for good, right? So Zok to Gemara. That's what the Gemara is going to deal with now because there's more. Zok to Gemara. Elu shmoina esrei treifus shenemar l'Moshe b'Sinai. That's why I was pointing out that there's 8 cases of nekuvas, because that's going to come into play soon. And this way we counted it as we learned it, so we don't have to go back and count it later. V'suleka, so there's no more than 18. V'ika basker v'shav shmaitza. Basker is a Rosh Hashanah for 4 different cases that are not in our Mishnah, and then shav shmaitza is another 7 that the Gemara is going to list off shortly. But I'll call upon them. There's a lot more. Zok to Gemara. Bishlama the Tana Didan. Bishlam, according to our Tana, the Tana Vishayir, he says Tana Vishayir. So who's Tana Didan? Avapid loitana ela yutches mikomokim loitana minyona. It doesn't say elu shmoina esetrefus. It says elu trefus. Whenever it says it without a number, it could be lavdavka. You have the concept of Tana Vishayir. So Bishlam Tana Didan, the Tana, those that he listed, with the Shire, Asib is Klal, that's the Zaklal. It's the catch-all phrase to include all the other ones that were not specifically listed in the Mishnah. We just learned the Brisa, Elu Yud Ches Trefus, so that Brisa, which clearly says there's 18 and no more, but that's not true. V'suleka, v'ika. So now we're listing off the basker. So base stands for behema shenechnechu raglea mina arkuva ulamayla. An animal whose leg got cut off from the knee and up is a treifa. That's going to be number 19. So no, because you could say that the Tana Devei Bishmol suffer like Reb Shimon ben Elazar. The Amar Yechayla he lichavais v'lechyais. Lichavais means to burn. So I assume it means you can cauterize it with heat, and then the wound will seal, and the animal will continue to live. And but even though it will continue to live, but it will still be considered a treifa. It will still be a treifa. So he holds. I'm sorry. It's still going to be a problem because Laman Ka'amar. Who are we trying to explain this count? We're trying to explain the count according to Devei Bishmol, who said 18. The Tana Devei Bishmol. But the problem is Tana Devei Bishmol Treifa Chayis really. He holds Treifa Chaya. So you can't say since it's going to live, it's not a Treifa and it's not one of the 18. You can't discount it because he holds that even though it could live, it would still be a Treifa. So you're still stuck with extra. So to Gemara, Treifa Chayis really. Ella, you have to say that Savar Locker Shimon ben Elazar the Amar Sherahi. You're going to have to say that not only does Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel hold that he'll actually learn that it will be kosher as well. so it's not one of the trephis. And if it's not one of the trephis, so then that extra one is accounted for. There's the second one of the Basker represents 4 different trephis. So Beis is Beimish and Nechta. So that we've neutralized that problem. But we have a Ikar Chisar and Beshedra. From Samach, it's referring to Chisar and Beshedra. If there's missing from the vertebrae, the Tanan Kamach Chisar and Beshedra. Now we know that a full Shedra is going to be Metama. If it's a full Shedra of a human, it's Metama Ba'oil. But if it's not a full Shedra, it's deficient, it's missing some of it, then it's like a regular piece of Basar B'Ksais with a mace, which is Metama B'Magu, but it's not Metama Ba'oil. So V'Shem HaYomim, Lagabe a mace, Shtei Chulish, if 2 full vertebrae are missing, that's called an incomplete spine, and it's no longer Metama Ba'oil. Uv'Shem HaYomim, Chulyachas, even if 1 vertebrae is missing. The Omer Rabbi Yudah Shmuel V'Chein L'Treifa, whatever is considered an incomplete Shedra Lagabe Tumas Mace is also the same one that would be a Siman of Tarfus. So what are you going to do with that? We have an extra one. Zok to Gemara, true, but 2 of the items listed in our Mishnah are really only counted as one because it's one general category. Hamsis, Ubesakoisis, the Kachoshavs, Lahu Betarte, you counted them as 2. Nikav Hamsis and Nikav Besakoisis, you consider that as 2. Nikavs, Chashvinu Bechada, will count that as 1. So now the 18 in our Mishnah went down to 17. Apik Chada Va'ayil Chada, and number 18 will be Chisarin B'Shedra. Frank Gemara Va'ika Galuda, that's the gimel of Bisagar. There's something called a gluda, which means either due to an accident or due to a fire or due to medicine, the animal was completely skinned, alive. So the animal has no skin, that's going to be a treifa. That's not a treifa. So we're still at 18. What about the psul that's called charusa, which Rashi teaches as the Katani Maslisin, the Eluk Sheris, the Charusa b'de Shemaim, Utanya Lakamon b'de Adam Treifa. What is Charusa? Kol shetzamka reya shala. Its lung hardened. It dried out and it hardened. It comes from a sudden fear that the animal has. If it's a fear that's because someone made a noise and shot a gun, that might heal it. But if it happened from a lightning or a thunder, which is bidei shemayim, that animal will be able to recover. So charusa bidei adam is also treifa. So again, we now have an extra one. Zok to Gemara. Charusa va'ika charusa mora man katanila. I'm sorry, mora man katanila. Mora is also one of the psulish treifa listed in our Mishnah. It's Rabbi Yosy Yehuda, apik mora va'ayil charusa. He doesn't necessarily have to hold that mora is going to be one of the treifas, and therefore we're still at a sum total of 18. Of 18, yes. So Zok Gemara, but we still now have a problem. There's another whole batch. There's another whole batch of psula shchita. What are you going to do with that? The Amar of Masna. Of Masna said, "Hi buka da'atma the shafmi duchte." Buka da'atma is like the thigh bone. I guess it's a hip bone where there's the thigh goes into the hip bone. If that's totally dislodged, is a treifa. So now we're at 19. Yom Rachish Rapapa Mishmei Rav Laksa B'chol Ya'achas Treifa. If one of its kidneys are sick, that makes it the treifa as well. Now we have 2 over. Utanan Nitlat Chol Kshera. If the entire spleen is taken out, the animal can live without the spleen. But Yom Rabavira Mishmei Rav Lashanu Elanitel. If it's completely missing, there it won't kill the animal. Avol Nikav. But if it's punctured and its juices could leak out, that's going to be treifa. So now you have 3 over. V'yomer Rabba bar Barchana or Mishmul simonim shnedaldalu beruvan treifa. If the simonim be'ema are totally dislodged, that's also going to be treifa. Now we're 4 over. V'yomer Rabbi bar Shila, Omer Rab Masna, Omer Shmuel, Nekra Tzela Me'ikara. If one of its ribs got totally dislodged from the spine, that's also treifa. Now we're 5 over. Vigulgala shenichbis abaruba. If the skull of an animal was crushed, so it didn't fall apart, but he got smashed over the head, so it's actually soft and mushy, so it's still intact, but it's now soft. Or ubasar achoifes roiva keres beruboy, there is a piece of meat, a layer that covers over all of the intestines. It's one big piece of meat. But if roiv of the piece of meat that's by the keres, so it doesn't mean roiv had a whole piece of meat. That piece of meat extends under the whole stomach. But the part of it that extends under the keres, if roiv of that, basar achoifes roiva keres, and it doesn't cover all the keres, it only covers roiv of the keres, but if roiv of that portion that covers the keres is torn, it's again treifa. So we've just listed off 7 treifas. What are you going to do with these extra 7 treifas? So I'll tell you what we'll do. Nekuve taman yahavu. How many examples of a hole make a treifa? There were 8. So what I could do is cheshvinu b'chad. I'll count all of the holes as one category, a hole. Now I have 7 extra. Apik shav v'ayil shav, and the shav shmaita will now make up for that count. Frek the Gemara, ihachi, if that's the case, psuke nami trehava. There's 2 examples of nifsaka hagageris, right? There's 2 examples in the Mishnah of something that got cut. If you're going to consider those, the whole, all the nikaves as one category, so why don't you consider the nifsaks as one category? Let me just quickly peek in the Mishnah to remind ourselves. There was the nifsak hagageris and there was the nifsak achutchala. So why don't you, that's the chut hashedra. So why don't you consider that as one as well? And now you have another extra. Trei hava chashvinu kachad, and then batchalu chada. So now you're missing one. V'oid, the Rabavira mishmei de Rava, what was the case of it? It was nikfat chayil, right? So nami nekuvahi. That's also nekuva. So if you're going to consider all the nekuvas as one, you're going to be one short as well. Ella hanoch tarti the afka loy topik. So the 2, because we just now found 2 extra, because nikev swallows one up and nifsak swallows one up. So how do you deal with those 2 extra? If you remember, when we had gluda and we had 2 that there was a machloikis about. We had gluda. I'm sorry, and the baby shnech well. You know what you could do? You could count. We said that's not on the list because it's not treifa. Go like the mandomer that it is on the list. So loy savik, alahanach ta'aflu behem shnech regla, but gluda loy savik, don't take it out. Kider abundant sphere lelatani Rabbi Shmuel the choshev nekume the hach derav avira bechad. That would all be considered as one. U'shrei psukim bechad mushkach lushaper. So Rashi goes through the cheshbon, but let's just finish the Gemara. Elahanach tarti davos loy suffer. So now let's see. Rashi does an accounting. So we finished the daf, but Rashi does a very nice accounting. So kederabon tzvir leila tani Rabbi Shmuel v'choshev nekuve v'hach derabavira bechad. Who trained psuke bechad, and the 2 examples of something that got cut would also be considered as one. And now umishkachas lushaper, then your count of 18 would work out. V'chol hanach trevis to menino l'kamon. And all the trevis that we discussed, that we're going to discuss in the Gemara later, Bereya, there's a whole list of different psulim in the lung. Kagoin chalif da'ayni, the dam l'bisra, l'biyasa, the autumn Bereya. I don't know what these are, but we'll see them soon. Kulu b'chalal reya shenikva ishachashenu. They're not individual counted items. They will fall into one of these 2 categories. Chaluf, what does chaluf mean? Hanu chasra mimakam shehiru uyali asham. It's missing from a place that's there. V'hana chazusa lukusa ninu, and chazusa, if something doesn't look right, that's called lukusa. V'chol lukusa soifeli nokev. So any psulim that we're going to run into that is chazusa, meaning it's damaged, we look at that like as a whole. If it's partially rotted, that's going to fall under the category of the kuva, the kuva, the chaluf the shnei krum the veshet. There's 2 krumen of the veshet, shneim the tulin memakam shein ruin liyos, ve'ein lach the kuva gedel mizu. That's also under the category of the kuva. Okay, we'll stop here. So far, it's a mitchesed.
Everything.
Yeah.
So when they asked Tani Rebbe Shmuel how many treifers are, he said, how many